Hello, everybody. I'm Rick Erickson. I'm our Chief Cloud Strategist here at Pythian, and I'm here to talk about the current state of cloud adoption for the first half of 2021. In my role, I like to spend time thinking about some of the past actions that have happened that can help our organization and your organization orient themselves around what's coming. Obviously, this pandemic has spent an enormous amount of kind of emotional capital and social capital on getting us to rethink how do we operate, how do we preserve capital, how do we innovate. And I thought it was reasonable to take a look at how this has affected how we spend and how we adopt cloud platforms. So let me jump right in and talk a bit more about this. And really, this deck is oriented towards companies, typically enterprises, that have started on the path of cloud adoption, but are trying to sort of think through where their peers are investing and approaching cloud adoption with an understanding of we're living in a global pandemic and don't have clear insight into when that pandemic's going to end and we're going to get back to this new normal. Let's talk first about how COVID-19 is impacting spending. Because we're currently in a global pandemic, many organizations are forecasting a lower than expected spend. You can see that in this chart. But the projection for 2021 is that those trends are going to begin to reverse and not necessarily directly impact the budget of most organizations. So I think this is interesting for a number of reasons, but in part, the pressure of remote work and collaboration and also preparing for hopefully what will be improvements in our economy in sectors that have been hurt have increased the velocity at which companies are really thinking about adopting cloud platform. And I'll talk a little bit more about why we think that's important and why resiliency in the current pandemic is driving much more innovation and positioning companies for growth. We know that over the last 3 or 4 years, cloud platform adoption, specifically the hyperclouds, have been in hypergrowth. This is really not changing even in the pandemic. So what we know is about 83% of enterprise workloads are expected to be in the cloud by the end of 2020. About 41% of those are public, about 20 are private, and about 22% are hybrid. We also know that multi-cloud and hybrid is still dominating. It's the dominating approach. You can see that from this chart. This is kind of a mid-year last year survey by Flexera on the State of Cloud report. I don't suspect this is going to be changing that much. There are some interesting footnotes here around where CAGR is specifically in IT spend in some bands of foundational client server tech that is getting older in a lot of these old private cloud data center facilities. So we're seeing that begin to sort of tick down as a percentage. But I think that's interesting. And I think the other thing that's interesting, this is recent data coming out from Gartner, which you may have seen, I think it was in November at the end of this last year, that the largest segment of growth is in the SaaS segment, right? So not a surprise, this would include Salesforce of the world and then other collaboration tools like Google Workplace and others. So this is a very, very big segment and continuing to grow at significant speeds. So I think the next key trend here, just to reiterate, is hybrid and multi-cloud isn't a strategy, it's a reality, and it's continuing. It's been this way for a number of years, and we still continue to see this as likely for 2021 and beyond. The next question is, will COVID-19 increase cloud spends? There's a little bit of data here, came out recently from Gartner, supports this hypothesis that the pandemic is really increasing the proportion of total global enterprise IT spending, specifically in cloud. So even though there's a compression in the overall budgets for some, about 44%, as we said in a couple slides ago, some enterprises, the percentage of spend going to cloud appears to be increasing proportionally. And there's three concerns that kind of support our observations here. Most organizations are still in a mode of, especially in those hard-hit industries, preserving cash and optimizing their costs, support and secure of a report of a remote workforce, and ensuring resiliency inside their organizations. The other sort of key trend here, and I think observations are, there's still pressure because of the pandemic, but companies are accelerating their spend and shifting towards cloud in order to support the response or reaction to what's happening in the pandemic. Most analysts generally support this notion that the pandemic has really increased this investment in cloud. The dark green describes total, an enterprise and an SMB, so the middle The middle band is for enterprise, and it describes a significant increase in cloud usage among these respondents. Light green is a slight increase in cloud usage, and then the red is a slightly lower than expected cloud usage. So you can see pretty significantly organizations, especially enterprise, are leaning into their use of cloud during the pandemic. And again, not a surprise because of some of the things that we're all sort of experiencing living in this two-dimensional world from home. And then I think the other thing is just, looking at what CIOs are saying about increasing their spend. You can see in this survey kind of at the bottom, this is a very recent survey, about 180 CIO participants. More than 60% are planning to increase their cloud usage. So again, reaffirming this idea that most organizations are planning on spending more money than originally anticipated in cloud. The other question that I thought that I would ask is, okay, where is this innovation happening today? And this is a survey from IDC that has, I don't think, shocking information in it, but it does reaffirm some of the things that we are probably all feeling as a result of pressure from the pandemic, and also just in understanding that organizations are spending more time not just testing in areas of innovation, but also beginning to operate some of those areas of innovation. I want to start with just kind of the negative growth at the bottom here. So you can see in this second platform band, IDC is sort of saying traditional premise-based applications and services. This is client server, software, hardware. We're seeing that for the first time start to trend downward as a percentage. I say for the first time because there's still a lot of legacy systems out there that are driving customers or companies to still invest. And we're seeing that across any of our customer base as well. And these are things like MRP, ERP, large scale operating systems that are required to operate general ledger and core project lifecycle, manufacturing, et cetera. The second band is where the highest percentage of IT spend is currently projected, and that's in cloud. So generally cloud, big data, and social and mobile. And if you remove mobile from this, the interesting observation here is that it actually becomes a double-digit percentage of growth. So mobile is still obviously relevant, but in terms of overall investment of IT spend, it's decreasing versus these other areas. Not a surprise, highest growth is happening in this innovation band, and this is really around security, artificial intelligence, IoT, and then robotics and 3D printing. So not huge surprises here for me, but let's go to the next slide and talk about where the highest importance of digital transformation is. And modernization still really leads the charge. I think was interesting here. So on the far right, companies are still spending a disproportionate amount of their IT budget on trying to modernize, whether that's a legacy application or refactoring applications that are in the legacy, or finding ways to build new applications. The modernization trend is still very relevant. The other thing that's relevant is agility is key for most companies who are adjusting to rapid change. We think this is also a result of pressure from the pandemic. More proportionally, policies, procedures, processes, the way that operations are run with, infrastructure and code and operations using infrastructure as code methodologies is also something that is also impacting companies' ability to be agile. Finally, organizing data. We still see managing and organizing data, both especially customer, but also enterprise as a whole, as being absolutely key to helping companies understand how to make business decisions, react and respond to their customers, and ultimately make decisions about where innovation needs to happen. Data analytics is definitely also driving as a key trend. I think the other two, which are still important and as a percentage relevant, but I still think it's good to ask this question in terms of where's innovation really happening and where are companies trying to transform. These are four things that I think you can take away from my learning and just overall the community at large about where the organization can invest to become more innovative. So the first is modernizing, continuing to modernize your IT infrastructure and implement policy that allows you to be agile, flexible, and manage your organization in a more modern way. This includes security, obviously, as well. The second is improving operational agility. And this is really about this whole idea of being adaptive to change. This also requires kind of a cultural shift for most organizations so that you're comfortable with maybe not necessarily knowing the perfect answer, but if the process or the approach that you're taking is wrong, you can react quickly and fail quickly and move on to another option. The third is really organizing your data. Clearly, customer is king, even more so now than ever before. And the better we can understand our buyers, the better we can understand their journey, how they transact with us, and interact with us and where they perceive value. The faster we can respond to that, the better we can implement and incorporate those learnings into our products and our services. And then lastly, be able to quickly measure this response. So NPS or customer satisfaction is something that's really critical to reacting and responding to what customers really need. Lastly, we don't know the future, but we can prepare ourselves for this concept of being nimble. It really sets up your organization to seize opportunities as they present themselves. And I believe that cloud platforms that have flexibility to utilize services when you need them, to reduce operating costs through managed services and platform services, and to give us components that allow us to respond and react and develop insights and respond and react to those insights quickly, going to put us in a really good position organizationally to pivot and respond to what may be coming at us in the next few years. So I want to thank you for your time today. Thank you for spending a little bit of time listening to me talk about cloud adoption in 2021. And if you have any questions or you'd like to give me some feedback on this presentation, and if it's helpful or not, please make a little note in the comments below and share it with your friends. And we would love to hear from you and your experiences as you've been going through this crisis too. So feel free to reach out to either one of your account reps here at Pythian or me. And I'm happy to also do a personal briefing of your industry relative to what's happening with COVID, or discuss where innovation's happening across organizations of similar type. Thanks again for your time.